Let me try something with you. In a moment, I want you to think of a number between 1 and 10. Do not overthink it. Just pick one. Got it? Now, here is the strange part. A very large percentage of people pick 7. If you picked 7, you probably think that was your choice. You could have chosen 3, or 9, or 1. But you did not. You picked 7. Why? You may say it just felt right. But what does that mean? Where did that feeling come from? Now let us take this further. Imagine I asked you to think of a tool. Most people think of a hammer. If I ask for a color, many people say blue. If I say pick a random letter, a surprising number of people choose the letter S. It feels random. It feels free. But it is not. The question is this: do you truly have free will, or does your brain make decisions before you even know you are making them? For most of history, we assumed the answer was obvious. Of course, we have free will. We feel it. When you choose what to eat, who to date, what to say in an argument, it feels like you are the author of that choice. But feeling something does not make it true. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet ran a simple experiment. Participants were asked to move their finger whenever they felt the urge. While they watched a clock, they reported the exact moment they became aware of the decision to move. At the same time, their brain activity was measured using EEG, or an electroencephalogram, which measures and records the brain's electrical activity using small metal sensors attached to the head. Here is what he found. The brain showed a readiness potential, a spike in activity related to movement, several hundred milliseconds before the person reported consciously deciding to move. In other words, the brain began preparing the action before the conscious mind claimed ownership of it. Your brain moved first. Your awareness followed. You did not decide and then act. Your brain acted and then told you a story about deciding. You might say a few hundred milliseconds is nothing. That is barely measurable. So imagine this instead. In later experiments using fMRI scans, researchers asked participants to press one of 2 buttons whenever they wished. By analyzing patterns of brain activity, scientists were able to predict which button the participant would press up to 7 to 10 seconds before the person reported making the decision. 7 seconds? Imagine someone standing next to you who can know what you are going to choose before you know yourself. That is not science fiction. That is published neuroscience. Now pause. If your brain decides before you do, what exactly is the you that feels in control? If free will truly exists, then if we rewind time to this exact moment under the exact same conditions, with the same memories, same mood, same brain chemistry, you should be able to choose differently. But imagine we rewind the universe like a film. Everything is identical, every atom in the same position. Would you really choose differently? Or would the same causes produce the same effect? This idea is called determinism, the view that every event is the result of prior causes. Your genetics, your upbringing, your environment, your current brain state. All of it forming a chain that leads to this exact moment. If you were born with different genes, raised in a different country, exposed to different ideas, you would be making different choices right now. That is obvious. So how much of you is actually something you authored? Consider alcohol. A few drinks can change your personality. It can lower inhibitions, alter judgment, and shift behavior dramatically. Antidepressants can reshape mood. Antipsychotics can reduce delusions. Brain injuries can alter impulse control. If chemicals and physical changes in the brain can transform decisions, where exactly is free will located? There are real cases where tumors growing in the brain have changed behavior in extreme ways. In one documented case, a man developed compulsive and inappropriate urges that disappeared after a tumor was removed. When the tumor returned, the urges returned. If removing a piece of tissue changes a person's moral decisions, was the earlier behavior freely chosen? Or was it the result of biology? This is where the discussion becomes uncomfortable. If choices are determined by brain states and brain states are shaped by genes and environment, then praise and blame start to feel complicated. Imagine 2 people. One grows up in a stable home with supportive parents and access to education. The other grows up in chaos, exposed to violence and instability. Years later, one becomes a surgeon. The other commits a crime. We say one chose discipline and the other chose wrong. But how much of those choices were shaped before they were even aware of choosing? This does not mean there are no consequences. It does not mean society collapses. It means responsibility becomes more nuanced than we like to admit. If free will does not exist, then nothing matters. Why try? Why improve? Why hold anyone accountable? This reaction is called fatalism, the belief that if everything is predetermined, we are powerless. But determinism does not mean you are powerless. It means your actions are part of the chain of causes. Imagine pushing a domino. The domino does not have free will, but it still plays a role in what happens next. Your thoughts, your decisions, your actions are part of the causal network of the universe. You are not outside the system. You are the system. Now, let us return to something practical. When you feel yourself making a decision, what is happening? Your brain is weighing past experiences, predicted outcomes, emotional signals, and environmental cues. All of this processing happens largely outside conscious awareness. By the time you decide, much of the work has already been done. Consciousness might not be the driver. It might be the narrator. Imagine your brain as a vast network making calculations constantly. Your conscious mind receives the final output and says, "I chose that." It feels personal. It feels intentional. But the machinery underneath is automatic. Even your desire to change yourself may not be freely chosen. If you decide to read a book to improve your thinking, where did that desire come from? It came from prior influences. Something you saw, something you heard, a conversation, a memory, all of it shaping the impulse before you were aware of it. This creates a paradox. If you try to change your subconscious patterns, that effort itself arises from subconscious causes. So, do you have free will? Some philosophers argue that free will does not require independence from cause and effect. They say free will simply means acting according to your desires without external coercion. If you act based on your internal motivations, even if those motivations were caused, that still counts as freedom. Others argue that if your desires are caused, then you are never truly free. This debate has lasted centuries, but here is something we can agree on. Whether or not free will exists in the absolute sense, believing you have agency changes behavior. Studies have shown that when people are primed to believe free will does not exist, they may become slightly more likely to cheat or behave selfishly in experiments. When people feel responsible for their actions, they regulate themselves more carefully. So there is a strange tension. If free will is an illusion, it may be one that helps society function. We praise heroes because we believe they chose courage. We punish criminals because we believe they chose harm. Remove that belief entirely, and moral language begins to wobble. Yet, understanding the role of biology and circumstance can increase empathy. If you recognize that someone's behavior emerged from factors beyond their control, you may judge less harshly. You may see criminals not as monsters, but as products of damaged systems. At the same time, you may feel more humble about your own success. If your achievements were shaped by genetics, upbringing, and luck, then entitlement fades. This is the tension. Free will may not exist the way you imagine it. You may not be a tiny commander inside your skull issuing orders. You may be the result of billions of neurons firing in patterns shaped by causes stretching back before you were born. But here is the final paradox. Even if every decision you make is determined, you still experience choosing. You still deliberate. You still reflect. You still feel responsible. So next time you pick a number between 1 and 10, pause. Ask yourself not just what you chose, but why. And then ask an even harder question. If we rewind the universe to this exact moment, would you really choose differently? Or were you always going to pick 7?